Okay, so now it's time for the pockets. The way the pockets are constructed for the Neale jumpsuit is slightly different to regular inseam pockets. The reason for this is number one, the side zip, but also I don't know if many of you have had the experience of putting pockets in the side seams and realizing that they add quite a lot of bulk because they move both forwards and backwards. So this method basically attaches the inseam pocket to the front of the jumpsuit, which means you prevent them kind of flapping about and hanging open. So what you need to do is grab your pocket piece and you'll be attaching it to the side seam on the front. You'll notice a few notches on the side seam on the front. You've got 3 notches. So you've got one, the first one down from the dart, that one indicates the top pocket notch, so it lines up with this one here. Then you will see a second notch. This is the bottom of the zip, and then you'll see a third notch, and that's the lower notch on the pocket. Okay, so that's what those notches are. So we just need to line up, so that's the top notch, like that. And the lower notch, I find the lower notch, there we go, pin it in place. We will just be stitching from our notch to our notch, and if you've got fabric like mine where it's a little bit tricky to see your notches, what I like to do is take a ruler, I'll move that pin so it's out of the way, and extend the notch, okay? And extend the notch. So that will just help when I'm sewing from the top to the bottom that I've got a very clear line of where I need to start and stop. And with this seam, it is important that you get it right, so you get a nice clean pocket. So it's worth doing if you can't see your notches through your fabric. And then I'm pinning my seam, and I'm just pinning down the side seam between the notches only, and then I will be sewing this with a 1.2 or half-inch seam allowance from the notch to the notch. Okay, and when you sew it, make sure you lower your needle into that notch, and then as you approach the end, just really slow down, and you can even walk your last couple of stitches in so that you don't go past it. If you do go past it, it's not the end of the world. You can always just unpick a few stitches and then go back to back stitch. Okay, so now that I've done my line of stitching, what I need to do is I need to snip in towards the line of stitching without cutting through it. So just use the tips of your scissors so you don't accidentally cut too far, and cut into the stitching but not through the line of stitching. So you do that at the top and at the bottom on both sides. Then what we're going to do is finish only this section. So you can flip this out of the way at the top and the bottom, and we'll be finishing this edge. The rest of the seam will be finished when we join the front to the back. Okay, as you can see, I've overlocked between my notches, or between my snips, so that bit's overlocked together. The next step is we need to understitch. So understitch means stitching either seam allowance or a facing, you also use it with facings or bias binding, to another bit of fabric. So what you do is you use your fingers to press the seam allowance towards the direction you want to understitch it. You don't press it first. Pressing it first can actually make it harder to do because you might press it incorrectly. This will help with pressing, and this will help the pocket sit flat. So what you need to do is use your cut to flip those parts of the pocket, and we're only understitching, and understitching means you stitch very close, okay, so about 2 millimeters, making sure the whole way that you're stitching that our seam allowance remains pressed towards the pocket. So we'll start stitching at the first cut and stitch down, understitch to the bottom. So as you can see, I've understitched. Now what you need to do is flip the front to the wrong side facing up, and then you use these cuts in the fabric to get the pocket to sit nice and flat. Okay, so as you can see, that's how it's going to be constructed. Now I just need to press it. So make sure you roll it. So you want this seam sitting slightly on the inside, okay? So that's what understitching does. It helps you keep that seam line on the inside. So from the outside, you'll just see that roll of fabric and you won't see that stitch line or that seam. So just take an iron and give it a good press on both sides, making sure that the pocket's sitting nicely and lining up. Okay, so I've pressed that now. I also checked, so it's a good idea to press from the right side as well and just check that you can't see the seam line or the stitch line. So that's done. And then what we do is we take our other pocket bag and we pin it to the first. One thing to note though, which another group member mentioned, which is a good point, that pocket bags, as you can see, parts of it are on the bias. So this is on the bias. This part can stretch too. If you're worried about your fabric stretching, so if you've noticed your fabric is a bit flimsy, it can be a good idea to stay stitch your pocket bags before sewing them. So now we just need to pin it. Make sure you're only pinning through the pocket, you're not pinning through the front, just the pocket. We've got a notch down here, so that can help us make sure everything's lining up nicely. So normally I pin a little bit and then I find any notches and use them to check everything's fine and then work around. Once that's pinned like this, all I'm going to do is sew with a 1.2 centimeter seam allowance all around the pocket bag, making sure that I'm keeping the front out of the way. We don't want to stitch through the front, so just through the pocket bags. So as you can see, I've attached the other pocket bag and I've also overlocked around the edge. So now what we need to do is we just need to attach it to the side panel so that it doesn't flip around. So we turn it to the right side and get things lining up nicely. And all you need to do is pin. So I've pinned through the pocket section. So that's why we've made these cuts. So it makes it really easy to do this and then pin. So once we'll be sewing from here to here and here to here. And once we sew that, then the pocket has become part of the front. So it won't flip to the back as easily because it's attached to the side seam. Okay, so as you can see, I've done my stay stitching. I forgot to mention when I was talking about this that this is just stay stitching. So we don't want to be able to see it when this seam is sewn. So this seam has a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So if you sew with a 6 millimeter seam allowance, then when we sew this seam or attach the zip like this, it will be hidden, okay? So the next thing we need to do is we need to finish this edge. So I'll be using the overlocker, making sure that our dart remains pressed down. And when we get to this section, we need to make sure we're holding the pocket out of the way. If you're worried you're going to catch it, you can use a pin. So you could move it across and put a pin in it just to make sure, or when you get to that point, just use your finger to move it across.